And we should be recording. It should have asked you if you wanted to accept. Go ahead and accept. So my name's Elliott Lawrence, and I'm a 4-H educator in Northern Ohio, Lucas County, to be exact. And welcome to today's field trip. I'm going to try to do one of these every Friday, and kind of a way to get out and see some things that you might not have got to see in the normal world, and also some things that you might not ever get to see. Like today's field trip is on the International Space Station. I'm not sure how many people have been on the International Space Station. Probably not a whole lot of us on this call today. I know I definitely haven't. So it's something cool that we can look at. Next week, I think we might explore the coral reefs. And so that's also something that not a lot of people get to see, coral reefs. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and start the virtual reality field trip. There is some resources in the chat box right now. Those are located on Lucas County 4-H's website, lucas.osu.edu/VR. So you can check those out. At the end of this presentation, I am going to put a link to participate in a short evaluation. The evaluation is very short. It's like 5-6 questions long. So that will be a link that you can click at the end of the presentation in the chat box. So on your screen, you should be seeing one of the first place that we're going to visit for this field trip, and this is called the Zaveda service module. This is one of the service modules for the space station. And so you can kind of look around and see what's going on. Not a huge place, not a huge place. I do apologize for some of you without a real strong internet connection. This might be a little choppy, so I do apologize for that. But this is actually a Russian service module, part of the International Space Station. This is the Russian side. The Russian Space Agency, Roscosmos, built and launched Zaveda, which Zaveda means star in Russian, actually, which is interesting. Zaveda is a third module put into space during the assembly of the International Space Station. The module provides 2 crew living quarters, life support systems, communication systems, and other systems needed to help support the space station. Zaveda also provides a docking port for Russian Soyuz and Progress spacecraft. So we're going to check out a few areas of the Zaveda service module. The first one up is we're actually looking at it right now. We're looking at the dining table. Much like our houses have a dining room table, the service module actually has a dining table as well. The crew has a dining table so they can eat meals together. However, this table has bungee cord and Velcro to hold food pouches and silverware down so they don't float away. Because you got to think about in space, there's no gravity. We're all floating. So they have to have Velcro and straps to strap the food and all the utensils around. Astronauts also have footholds to keep themselves in place when they're sitting around the table. Pretty interesting to think about that when you're eating dinner tonight around the dining room table. The next stop over here is the body mass index, or body mass measuring device. What's a body mass measuring device? A body mass measuring device is like a bathroom scale. So we can measure body weight on Earth, but not in microgravity environment. So instead, we measure mass. So it's important to track mass for health reasons. Astronauts can use body mass measuring device, which looks similar to a pogo stick, which is really kind of interesting. You never think about how do they measure themselves when they're in space. Next one up, this is one of the coolest ones. It's right beside that, is that's actually a window, and that window looks directly at Earth. And so the astronauts that are in the ISS can look down and check out Earth. That's also, if you want to get any Earth shots or anything like that, you stick the camera lens up against that, and that's how that's how some of the shots get taken of Earth. Next up, speaking of camera lens, there's a couple camera lenses hanging on the wall. Astronauts use these cameras to take photos of the Earth. The space station is about 250 miles above the Earth. You need a very long lens to take clear photos. Astronauts go through training classes to learn how to use the cameras and lenses before launch. So that's a pretty interesting, it looks almost like a camera that we would have, except the lenses, if we were up there, it'd be pretty, they're pretty long lenses. So they're a little bit different than what we're used to. The next service module we're going to go to is the Japanese Experiment Module, or the JEM as it's called. The JEM is nicknamed the Kibo, which means hope in Japanese. Kibo is the largest single module on the space station, and Kibo is primarily a laboratory full of experiments that study space medicine, biology, materials, biotechnology, and communications. One of the things we're going to look at here in the Kibo is the space airlock. And so that space airlock is where a lot of experiments go on. There's a robotic arm that can go inside of that airlock, and when they're exposing materials to space, we can learn how to react to the vacuum of space and radiation. So inside of that module is very similar to the effects of space. Next up is a massive, big old freezer. And you wouldn't think about, what do they need a freezer on the International Space Station for? So the freezer is a -80-degree laboratory freezer. Now, most of our freezers run about 0 degrees. This one is -80 degrees laboratory freezer. And so this freezer allows astronauts to preserve and store biological samples collected from astronauts on the space station before the samples return to scientists on Earth for analysis. Examples of biological materials include blood, saliva, urine, microbial, and plant samples. Pretty interesting. Next up is a workstation. Now, this is a little bit different than our workstation that we might have. I've had to construct my workstation in my house since we're all stuck at home right now. This one's a little bit different. Astronauts use this workstation when they're putting experiments into space through Airlock. They use a joystick when controlling the robotic arm and see what they're doing on the monitor right in front of them there. So that's kind of cool. Next up, this is neat too. So why do they call it the International Space Station? These flags in Kibo represent the 15 countries that work together to build the International Space Station. Does anybody know all 15 countries? I'm going to tell you. USA, Russia, Canada, Japan, Belgium, Denmark, France, Germany, Italy, Netherlands, Norway, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, and the United Kingdom. All 15 countries have a part in the International Space Station. Next up, we are going to make a trip over to the Columbus Laboratory. So the Columbus Laboratory is the European Space Agency built the Columbus, which is the first permanent European research laboratory in space. As a laboratory, Columbus supports scientific and technological research. In this microgravity environment, researchers on the ground, supported by astronauts in space, can conduct experiments not possible on Earth. So the first one that we're going to look at is the centrifuge. Actually right over here. The centrifuge, did you know astronauts are also experiments? You might not have known that. As astronauts, they are up in space. They're in a place that not a lot of humans have been. And so they're actually experiments as well. They're actually human experiments. They have to draw their own blood so we can study it back on Earth. This centrifuge spins around and uses force to separate fluids and of different densities, like separating red blood cells from plasma in blood. So it's kind of cool that, these experiments that are happening in space actually teach us what space is all about by these astronauts. Next up is, if I can find it over here. There it is. There it is. The ultrasound. Ultrasound uses sound waves to look at organs and structures inside the body. Since the body changes in microgravity, this is an important tool for astronauts to have. Astronauts use it to look at a variety of body parts, including eyes, heart, and leg muscles. So it's something you might not think about. As experiment devices, that has to be, you have to look at those things constantly as an astronaut to make sure that something crazy isn't going to happen. Most of the time when we think about ultrasounds, we think about maybe having a baby or a broken bone or something like that, where this ultrasound is actually looking at the internal components of all these astronauts. And over here, let's see if I could turn it around. There we go. It kind of looks like we have like zero gravity going on right here. So this is called Veggie. The Veggie plant growth experiment allows astronauts to grow salad-type crops as a source of nutritious and fresh food, which are very important if we want to travel further into space. Veggie can support a variety of experiments to see how plants grow in microgravity. It's something really interesting that important to think about, that we need to think about how things grow on Earth or in microgravity. How can we get things to grow in other areas, you know, that we might need to go to at some point in time, or we might want to go to at some point in time. Next up, we have Node 2, otherwise known as the Harmony. And this links to the Kibo, Columbus, and Destiny modules all together. So if you think of this is like the central, and all these modules are coming off of the Harmony. Harmony is a docking port for visiting cargo supply vehicles like SpaceX's Dragon, Orbital ATK's Cygnus, and Japan's H2 transfer device, HTV. Harmony is the first US module NASA did not name. Students actually named this module following a competition in 2007. That's kind of cool. So this module also houses the crew quarters. There it is. There's the crew quarters. Zoom out a little bit. There you go. And the crew quarters has 4 of them. There are 4 crew quarters. A crew quarters is the astronaut's personal space where they sleep, like a bedroom on Earth. Astronauts can decorate and personalize their space with special items from home, like photographs. So it's kind of cool. That of course, that crew quarter kind of opens up into like a, I mean, it's not a huge room, but it opens up into a small living space. This is one of my favorite things. This one is actually the, if we go right over here, there we go. If we can check that out. That is an IMAX camera. So a lot of, if you ever go to the movies and you ever watch an IMAX movie, especially the ones particular about space, this is where it comes from. So the IMAX cameras are used by astronauts to film scenes for IMAX movies. From 250 miles up, you can get really, really amazing views of our planet. And these, and they also use these images to study changes that are happening on Earth as well. Next up is the Worktable. So the Worktable, as you see right there, it's a multi-purpose Worktable, gives astronauts a large surface to work and doubles as a storage for small tools and writing utensils. Astronauts use Velcro as a way to keep them from floating around. You can see kind of the glove kind of stuck on that working table. That's probably got some Velcro stuck to that, and that's how it keeps from floating around. Imagine trying to catch your pencil every time you go to try to we think of a pencil, we get done writing, you know, and we get done writing, we just lay it on the table and it stays there. Well, in the International Space Station, this table's gonna, this pen's gonna float around. So they have to have these special tools and stuff to be able to make sure that doesn't float around. You can always have access to it. Next up in this one is the, let's see, there it is. Next up is the cargo transfer bags, which are called CTBs. These are the huge giant white bags that you see back in the back there. These bags hold cargo for launch, disposal, storage, or landing. They all have zippers so they stay closed, and netting inside to keep the cargo from floating around when opened. So it's something you think about. Let's think about, maybe, I love camping. So let's think about maybe going on a camping trip. So I've got these big tubs, and I've got all the stuff for that camping trip in these big tubs. So I unload them out of my car, load them into the campsite, and we're done, you know, we're ready to go. Well, on the International Space Station with microgravity, you really can't do that. You have to be very careful about that, because as soon as you open up that container, everything's going to float around. And also the containers are going to float around too. So they have a very unique way of keeping those containers. Everything that you load on the International Space Station, anything you take up there has to come in on those types of containers, because they have to be secured when they come in and when they leave as well. Next up is the Destiny, and the Destiny is, hold on a second, I'm going to zoom in. Zoom out here real quick. There we go. Here's the Destiny, a long shot of the Destiny. Destiny is the main research lab for the U.S. science experiments. This is kind of like the U.S. side of the ISS. Destiny supports a variety of experiments and holds 13 different racks or shelves full of experiments. And Destiny also contains a control center for the station's robotic arm operations. So there's a series of robotic arms that are outside of the ISS that are controlled from the Destiny. First up, we're going to look at little tiny, hopefully you can see it down there. It's kind of on the floor, actually. See if I can draw a circle around it. There you go. So right there down there, we see the little green, looks like little green handholds. That's a microgravity science glove box. Astronauts use the glove box to perform contained science experiments. The glove box ensures no parts, fluids, or gases escape into the rest of the space station. You have to be very careful about that, because it's a very controlled environment. You just can't open a window and let the place air out. You have to be able to control all those substances in order to keep the astronauts safe and to keep the entire ISS running. Okay, so next up is is the cycle ergonometer with vibration isolation system. So this is called the CEVIS, C-E-V-I-S. So have you ever wondered what it's like to ride a bike with no seat? Maybe you've tried it before. Maybe you've broke a bike, the seat broke off, can't find the seat, try to ride the bike without a seat. It's kind of hard. The astronauts use a cycle ergonometer like a stationary bike, but it doesn't have a seat. And they only have pedal clips and handholds to use. And so this is kind of hard to see. What you're looking at kind of in this area here is the headrest. And so it's kind of a stand-up situation. And let's see if I could try to, there we go. It's a little bit better to kind of get how this thing works. And so you hold on to it and then you pedal at the bottom. And so since there's zero gravity, there doesn't have to be a seat in order for you to do that with. You can just you just kind of strap yourself in, you know, and be able to do that. Next up is the carbon dioxide removal assembly, and that is up here at the top, that big white area there. The carbon dioxide removal assembly is one of the space station's life support systems, and it allows astronauts to live and work in space. It cleans the carbon dioxide out of the air as astronauts breathe. So as we know, we breathe out, we emit carbon dioxide as we're breathing. And so too much of that in a closed, confined space eventually be at too much carbon dioxide for the astronauts to breathe, and they would eventually pass out, and they could also eventually pass away or die because of that carbon dioxide amount. And so what this does is it scrubs the carbon dioxide, and it cleans it and makes it into a little bit to fresher cleaning air, or fresher clean air. So the last thing in this one is the portable water dispenser. So once again, we have to think about, how do these astronauts drink? Or you can't just have a water bottle that you drink from, because as soon as you open up that water bottle, that water is going to start coming out of that water bottle, and you're not going to be able to control it, and it won't be able to go into your mouth. So this water system is a series of straws that you actually you can suck on, similar to like a water bottle, but you're sucking on that, and it allows the astronauts to drink. And second to last module here is the Node 1, or the Unity. Unity was the first US module attached to the International Space Station. It's a connector piece which joins other modules together. Unity contains more than 50,000, that's right, 50,000 mechanical items, 216 lines of carry fluid and gases, and 121 internal and external electrical cables using 6 miles of wire. It's pretty crazy, pretty crazy. So first up, since it's a connector, it has to have an airlock, and so that's what you're looking at right now. You're looking at the airlock as the astronauts prepare for spacewalks in the airlock. This airlock is how they move from inside the space station out into space safely. When out on a spacewalk, the spacesuit is their own personal spacecraft that provides oxygen, water, and a pressurized environment. So they open up that door. Imagine that as like a little door that they can open up. Projector and the screen. So this is a little bit different than what you would think of as a projector and a screen in a classroom, but a very similar concept. As the astronauts stay busy with work, they also have downtime. During this time, the crew might gather and watch movies together. Other things the astronauts do that they like to do is reading, sending emails to their families, and looking out the windows at Earth. I would imagine the first few weeks or even months, or maybe even longer than that, I would imagine the awe of seeing Earth down below you through that window would just be amazing and enough entertainment in itself. But after a little while, much like all of us cooped up inside of our houses right now, after a little while, we might get a little sick of looking at Earth every day. So there is some stuff that you can do for entertainment on the ISS. It's not all just work. This is something interesting. These are patches of all of the missions that the astronauts have came on. So astronauts create a patch to represent each mission. About a 6-month period is each mission to the International Space Station. The crew works hard before launch to design a patch that represents them and what they will do during their mission. So it's kind of neat to see all of the different patches that you can see they're mounted on that whatever that piece is right there. Next up is the Zarya functional cargo block. Zarya was the first module for the International Space Station, launching into space in 1998. Russia built Zarya, which means sunshine in Russian. Zarya initially provided the station's propulsion and power, but now provides storage and carries external fuel tanks. So the Zarya is actually what got the ISS up into space. Now, first up on this is the are the ACY canisters, the waste collection canisters. Now this is exactly what you think of as waste. We're talking about bathroom waste here. The toilets on the International Space Station don't flush. So astronauts have to store this solid waste, and these containers store the waste until they're loaded onto a cargo vehicle. The cargo vehicle burns up in the cargo vehicle burns up in the atmosphere during reentry. Urine, however, is recycled. So that's pretty interesting. All of their solid waste goes into these canisters. They send it out into a space device, and the space device just disintegrates with all the waste in reorbit. So, and then urine is recycled. If you ever like to look into that, check out how ISS recycles their urine. It's pretty interesting. It's kind of gross, but it's pretty interesting. This is over here is an emergency mask for the ISS. Just like at home or school, the space station has to have items in case of emergency. The astronauts have access to masks they can wear in case of smoke or something toxic in the air. Like I said, a few mods back, there's, you know, that lock is there so they can do experiments in a controlled environment. Hopefully that keeps everything able to be where it needs to be. But just in case, they do have the emergency mask. Okay. Stowage space. When astronauts have trash or waste, they can't just take it outside. They can't open the window, can't open the door. Astronauts stow trash in several areas like this one. After it builds up, they transfer it in a cargo ship that will either return to Earth or burn up during re-entry into Earth's atmosphere. Pretty interesting. Some things that you might not have ever thought about on the International Space Station. Last node that we are going into is called the Tranquility. This is the newest node. Pretty horrible picture there, the Tranquility. It's much more scenic. There we go. So the node was one of the last modules added to the International Space Station. It provides additional room for crew members and many of space station's life support and environmental control systems. It also has docking ports for visiting spacecraft. Here's the cupola. The cupola is literally a window, and you're looking at it right now, right in front of the astronaut. Literally a window to the world. It provides astronauts with a spectacular view of Earth below. Astronauts spend time in the cupola taking pictures of Earth, often documenting storms and other natural wonders. Pretty cool to watch. That's pretty neat to look out that window and look down. Here we have the waste collection system. That's what we were looking at when we first walked in. The waste collection system, the astronauts have an out of this world toilet. The toilet collects both solid and liquid wastes and stores them in these canisters. Even astronauts have chores and must take turns cleaning the toilet and replacing the canisters. That would not be a fun job. Not be a fun job at all. Next up is what's called the ARED, or the Advanced Resistive Exercise Device. Astronauts must work out to ensure their muscles don't shrink, atrophy, which is what we call atrophy. When you're in space, muscles, if you don't work them out, they tend to shrink. That's why a lot of times when astronauts get back from space, they have a hard time walking, and they have to stay still because they're not used to that gravity, and their muscles have changed since then. So they have to exercise during space. And so on board the space station, we have this ARED. Since lifting weights and microgravity doesn't work, if you can imagine lifting weights and zero gravity, this is the easiest workout I've ever done. It's so easy. That doesn't really do anything for your muscles. So this resistive device produces resistance and allows the astronauts to exercise their muscles. Next up on same thing is almost the same principle as there it is, as the resistive device. This is a treadmill, the T2 treadmill. Running and floating at the same time doesn't work. Once again, it's counterproductive. And so astronauts have to wear straps around them to keep their shoulders tied to the treadmill. Did you know a few astronauts have run a marathon on this treadmill at the same time as people ran on the Earth? It's pretty neat. So if you run the amount of time that somebody would run a marathon, the astronauts are up 250 miles above Earth, running on this treadmill as well. It's pretty neat thing to think about if you're into running. Okay, and that brings us to the end of our tour of the International Space Station. And let me put up the real quick the link to the evaluation. And if anybody has any questions, please let me know at this time. You can unmute yourself, or you can type them in the box. That works as well. Any questions?
I saw a thing that said 2CUP. What does that mean?
So that is a sign. That was back. Was that in Unity? I forget. It's actually right here.
No, it's actually this one.
Yeah, it's right here. I see it right now. So that's the cupola that I was talking about that has the display from Earth. The cupola is that's what it's short for cupola. It's CUP, cupola.
Okay.
There's not a cup there. So that's just telling the astronauts.
Just a room lead into a cup.
What's that?
Just a room lead into a cup.
Well, it's the window. It's the window to space. Is the cupola.
That's all for now. For the questions.
Good question.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Anybody else have any questions? That is the link to the evaluation. Like I said, it's very short. Just getting some information off of you, and very curious as to where everybody's from. I know there are quite a few different places came from quite a few different states. I know posted that. So also, if you're interested, we're going to do one of these every week. Every Friday from 3 to 4. It's the same link that you clicked on today. And so I really do appreciate everybody showing up, and hopefully that you learned something while you're watching this, and hopefully it was a little entertaining. We will get, this was the first time I did it. I did some tests before yesterday, and everything worked fine. And then, of course, there's technical difficulties the day of. So hopefully it gets a little bit smoother, and a little bit smoother, and a whole bunch of different places. I don't know how. There's over 900 expeditions that we can go on, so that's a lot of weeks. I don't intend on taking 900 weeks, but I do plan on doing this up until we're back in school, or we're maybe out of school for the summer. So hopefully everybody joins me every week. And next week, as I said, we're going to be looking at the coral reefs. So that's a pretty neat, really scenic, it's a really cool field trip, because it's really scenic, and there's some really neat pictures that you can check out. Once again, if you have any questions at all, my information, if you click on the first link that I gave all of you, my information can be found on the website. And I'll type in my email address right now that you can have that. If you were ever, I just typed it to one person. It is going to be 3 o'clock every single week. And it should last about 30 minutes, 30, 45 minutes. Some of them are a little bit longer than others. And then some of them are also shorter than others. This one was about 8, I think, and 6 or 8, I forget now. But this one's kind of a longer one. So some of them might be a little bit shorter too. Did I? Let me see.
What?
There we go.
How do people can video feed?
What's that?
I mean, like, how are you getting these pictures? Or
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. That's a good question. So all of these pictures are coming from Google Expeditions. And so if you click on the link at the very top of the chat box, that's lucas.osu.edu/VR, it'll actually there's a link at the top of that page that'll send you to the Google page that you can go on to see all of these. And so I am presenting Google Expeditions. I guess I should say that at the beginning. I don't claim I didn't create these. I obviously was not on the International Space Station to take pictures. And so all of these are created by somebody else, but they're all compiled in Google Expeditions.
thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Without any questions, feel free to email me if you need to, and make sure you take the evaluation at the, I'll post it down here again, just to make sure you got it. Shouldn't take very long. That's not supposed to have my email address in front of it. Well, sorry, I'm not doing it.